I just found this little pink table in a thrift store. It wasn't originally pink, somebody painted it. And I'm pretty sure underneath the pink paint is a mid-century modern Heywood Wakefield table. You might remember a Heywood Wakefield desk that I did a while back. And I think this table is from that same furniture line. Most obviously by the shape of it. And also, if you look underneath, it has these screws holding it together, and they look a lot like the screws that were holding together that desk that I worked on, and a few other Heywood Wakefield pieces that I've done. So this one has been painted pink, and if you look down here, you can see it was also green at one time. I'm pretty sure that Heywood Wakefield didn't make any green furniture, so I'm assuming that's also not original. But we'll see. First thing I'm going to do is scrape off some of the paint on the underside, because they did actually paint the underside as well. They were very thorough. And just see if I can find the maker's mark, just to confirm that it is Heywood Wakefield. I'm not sure if the maker's mark is going to be on this piece or on the underside of the top. So I'll just start with this one. Well, so far just numbers and no maker's mark. I think it would probably be in the center if it was going to be here, so I'm going to start on the other surface. Well, I haven't found the maker's mark yet. It's not in the center of either one of these levels. And I guess it could be anywhere, or maybe it's not on there at all. Who knows? But this paint is proving to be really hard to scrape off, so I'm going to stop here and figure out a different way to get the paint off. Like maybe a stripper, or maybe a combination of stripping and sanding. This piece doesn't have any veneer on it. It's all solid birch, probably. So it's not as risky to sand the paint off on this piece. Not as risky as it would be on a piece with veneer, where you could easily sand through the veneer. Okay, so I've scraped or sanded through most of the layers, and I'm down, it looks like, to the last one or two layers. So I think to try to get through the last bit, I'm going to try some stripper and see how this works. It's kind of cold out here. It's only in the 30s, so I'm not sure if that'll affect the performance of this, but I'll give it a shot. I don't want to just keep sanding or scraping, because the sander's not really able to, it's having a hard time biting into this layer, except on the edges, of course. That's a lot easier for it to grab there. And the same thing with the scraper, so see if the stripper works any quicker. Well, the stripper had very little effect on the paint. It did seem to work on the little bits of pink paint that were still on here, but the green paint wasn't touched by it. So I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try a heat gun. Oops. Well, it looks like I burned the table here at a couple spots, so I got to be more careful. Hopefully, I can sand those out at least a little bit. On second thought, I'm not so sure those burn marks are from me. They look an awful lot like cigarette burns. I don't think this big heat gun would have made such a small concentrated burn mark. Let's see if I find any more on the tabletop. Well, looks like somebody's drawn on this table. Hopefully that's the worst of the damage I'm going to find. So I got most of the paint off of the top, and before I do the rest of it, I think I'll just take it apart, and it looks like it's just held together with screws. Hopefully there's no glue involved, but we'll see. There's no glue. That's a good thing. There it is. That's what I was looking for. The Heywood Wakefield Maker's Mark. So that says champagne. That's the name of this particular finish that's on here. Heywood Wakefield, I think they had champagne finish, and then they had, I think, one called wheat. And there may have been another one. Not sure. So I'm finding that the scraper is working well on the legs. Probably because they're curved, so it's easier for it to bite into it. These darker areas here are the original finish underneath the paint. So I want to get that off too. So I used the heat gun on the rest of the piece, and there's still a little bit of paint here and there that needs to come off. And I'm going to give the stripper another try, see if it'll work to get off just this little bit here. And maybe it'll get off this, whatever this drawing is here. There's also still some of the original lacquer finish that was under the paint that is on here, so hopefully this will get that off too. If not, then I'll just have to sand it. Well, the stripper is helping a little bit with this green paint here, but it's probably not going to get all of it, so I'm going to have to do some sanding either way. So now I've sanded all of the parts with the orbital sander up to 120 grit. And now I'm going to finish them off with 180 grit by hand. Well, I've got all the parts cleaned up now. After lots of sanding and scraping and stripper and the heat gun, I did leave a few small spots of paint here and there, just as a nod to its past life. And now I'm ready to apply the final finish, which is just going to be a clear finish. And I think I'm going to use lacquer. The original finish on this would have been Heywood Wakefield's champagne finish. And we saw that champagne marking earlier in the video on the table. But I'm not going to try to recreate that finish. For one thing, just because I don't know how. I'm sure it's probably a multi-step process, and I'm sure I don't have the materials to do it. And also, I'm not that crazy about the look of it. So I'm just going to go with a clear finish, and if somebody somewhere down the line wanted to redo this with the original style finish, they can still do that. It's no problem. But just a note about these Heywood Wakefield pieces, they were never actually really meant to have a clear finish on them. The original finish was kind of semi-transparent, so you could still see the grain, but it was kind of murky looking. So I'm just going to wet this down with some naphtha so you can see the grain pattern. And you can kind of see that it looks like they didn't really put much time into trying to match these boards together, because this top is made from a few different boards glued together. So none of them really match that well, and this is birch, and birch can be pretty blotchy. So some people may think it looks a little too blotchy. But I have another Heywood Wakefield piece in my house, the desk that I mentioned earlier, and I just did a clear finish on that. And yeah, there are some spots that are a little blotchy looking, but I'm fine with it. I use it practically every day, and I never am put off by the way it looks. So I'm just going to go with a clear finish on this and see how it turns out. Okay, time to spray the lacquer, and I already sprayed it on the legs, and it seemed to work fine. I was a little worried because it's only about 55 degrees out here, which is not ideal for spraying lacquer. It's pretty cold, but seems to be drying okay. So here it goes. Well, I was carrying the table after I sprayed the first coat of lacquer, and this leg fell off right onto the concrete. I didn't have the screws in tight, and I managed to put a pretty large dent right on that ridge of the leg. So I want to try and steam it out with a soldering iron and some water. See if I can get it to raise up a little bit. I'm going to put some water on it first. Then I'll take a wet paper towel and a hot soldering iron and see if I can get that to come up at least a little bit. Yeah, And it is coming up already, I can see. I don't know if it'll come up all the way, but we'll see. Looks better already. Whoa. Looks like I cut myself. And that's a lot better. I think it actually came up probably 90% of the way. So now I'll just have to let it dry and lightly sand that area, just that area, and then respray some lacquer over it. So earlier I think I mentioned how birch can sometimes appear blotchy. And this is an example of, in my opinion, a good blotchy. The way you have the light and dark spots on this leg, it's almost kind of like a leopard skin look. And I like that. So sometimes blotchiness can be good. But unfortunately, this leg is the only leg that's like this. The rest are pretty plain. And here it is, all finished. Before I go, I'd like to remind everybody that my channel has a Patreon account where you can gain access to exclusive Patreon-only videos and behind-the-scenes content. I'll put a link on the screen if you want to check it out. Thanks for watching.